Hi, I'm Li Xueying, and welcome to Asian Insider. In this episode, the Straits Times Chongqing-based correspondent Ao Wei spills the beans about a popular Chinese grilled fish dish, Kaoyu, and the dispute over where it originated and what that all says about the importance food plays in China. Hi, Wei, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shuang, for having me.
So you went on a bit of an odyssey recently and a culinary journey seeking to track the origins of this dish, Kaoyu, from Chongqing. And it has also become one of the most popular Chinese dishes, right? Both inside and outside of China. So for the benefit of those who don't quite know what this dish is, tell us a bit more about Kaoyu from Chongqing and how does it really compare in the way it's taken root in popular Chinese culture with other well-known fish dishes, whether it's the Sichuan 酸菜鱼 or the Cantonese steamed fish.
So, in a couple of ways, Chongqing Kaoyu kind of represents Chongqing itself. The fish that's being used is freshwater fish, and Chongqing sits along the Yangtze River. So then, I guess that will be an easy source of the fish. And the peppers that is used actually is also grown in the region. We have also mala, peppercorns, and as well as some other Chinese chillies, typical Chinese chillies that actually quite a number of locals actually make their own. So in that sense, if we think about Chongqing, we think about its location, its geography. The Chongqing curry represents a lot of that, from the fish that's being used to the spices that is being used. So in that sense, a very local dish, and it's served in this heated metal pan and just drenched in a lot of oil, as this region is well known for. And so that's really the fish.
Very tasty, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was also why I actually went on this odyssey, right? To go and it's also an excuse to go and eat. But I mean, you mentioned earlier about the popular culture, and how this dish is rooted in it and how it has gone beyond the shores of China. So, the way that the Cantonese steamed fish and also the Sichuan 酸菜鱼, this has to do with the fact that, of course, being from Singapore, and our region, I think Cantonese dishes are very familiar food to a lot of us because a lot of us have ancestry from Guangdong, Fujian, and it's also no coincidence that these are also the earliest province where we see people living. They are coastal provinces, right? So they will go to different parts of the world. A lot of them are in Southeast Asia, and that's how we have also, as a region, embraced it. But you also see that,
and I should also say at this point that it's not just a Cantonese steamed fish, right? It's also the Teochew steamed fish.
Yes,
that's also very popular in Singapore.
Correct. And there's a lot of pride. I think the Teochew in Singapore also have a lot of pride about their own their Teochew fish.
So we will be remiss not to mention that, and they might be very upset if we don't talk about it.
Definitely.
Okay?
And I think one of the sub goals of this podcast is also get people to feel hungry and then, go out and have a good meal.
Sure.
So,
yes, okay.
So that is the earlier immigrants, right? Those from China to Singapore in that sense. But actually, over the years, we've also seen mala, Sichuan and Chongqing dishes going to our hawker centers. I would say that, they are now a common sight in our hawker centers, which I think is also very representative of Singapore culture in that sense. So Singaporeans have also taken to it, but I think also represents the evolving Chineseness of Singapore. Right now, previously our immigrants used to be from Fujian and Guangdong, but now we also see different immigrants from other parts of China. So Sichuan and Chongqing, we see that representation, and because that dish is also, in some sense, have their own unique traits, the mala spice, so that also becomes very prominent to us. And now increasingly we also see Hunan, Hubei, and even China's Dongbei region, right, coming into adding flavors to our culinary scene. So in that sense, we also would see immigrants from these different parts of China coming to our part of the world now. So in that sense, we can recognize this as also an increasingly worldliness of the Chinese. More of them are coming out from different parts of China. So yeah.
Okay, so that is a really good summary of why this has taken root in, I guess, not just Singapore, actually Southeast Asia as well. But what about within China itself? Among the Chinese from the different parts of China, are they also cognizant of this Kaoyu dish, and are they also flocking to Chongqing to try it out?
Kaoyu, I think, because it uses spices that are very unique to Sichuan region, and Chongqing being a very populous region, actually in some sense also has a lot of representation across China. So many of them will flock to big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen. In fact, Shenzhen and Guangzhou would be very popular places for the early immigrants of Chongqing to go out to work because in that sense the nearest big city for them. So a lot of them want that taste of home, right? And then subsequently, people along the region may get who are native to say Guangdong and all that may feel like, okay, this is interesting. We may not accept it, but we can try it. And increasing that's how we see that kind of amalgamation, right? The kind of assimilation into like other parts of China. So yes, Kaoyu in that sense is very popular because of the heavy represent of Chongqing in different cities. Chongqing is China's most popular city, right? 31.9 million. A lot of them also go out to work in different big cities, and they will want their food to have lah. In that sense. So people are aware, and I think when they come to China, to Chongqing now for holidays, is definitely one of the things that they try, including Chongqing xiaomian, which also uses the mala spice. So these are other things that I think have also become more popular lah.
Okay, so you talk about how people come to Chongqing to try this dish, and there was actually a bit of a mystery about where exactly in Chongqing did Kaoyu originate. And I think, as you wrote in your article, the stakes are very high for the respective regions, right? Whether it was the Wushan or whether it's Wanzhou. So, a region's association can really be big business, and it can even be even bigger. So how was that playing out on the ground when you visited both Wushan and Wanzhou in order to sort of get to the bottom of where did Kaoyu come from?
So for Wushan, where we were then where I was then introduced to 纸包鱼, as the term Kaoyu becomes increasingly localized to Wanzhou, right? We see that as part of an eating street where you will see 3.5 kilometers a road where it's really just selling 纸包鱼. All the shops there sell 纸包鱼. So in that sense, there is that demand. And the demand comes from the cruise tourists who actually, it's a very popular route actually from Chongqing's main city to Hubei. So they will pass by the different parts of the Yangtze River, and Wushan is one of the more popular stops. And then they will have a 纸包鱼 and all that. So it adds to that local like signature, that postcard from Wushan. You can enjoy a view of the Three Gorges, and while having your 纸包鱼, they don't call it Kaoyu anymore, as Wanzhou has taken over that term. So in Wanzhou, the Kaoyu Association is hoping to set guidelines, right, to raise the overall standards of the industry. So that is one way that we see how that has taken off or is being played out on the ground. They are even going down to the specifications of the minimum weight of the fish to make sure that tourists are not cheated when they get a smaller fish and then they leave a very bad experience. So there is a lot of that talk of making sure that tourists have good experience. There's also talk about working with Shandong to actually grow the fish there, because Chongqing is so mountainous and faces flatland restrictions, which traditional farmers consider necessary to have for fish farms, right? So high-tech farming might be too expensive. The fish that I had, close to 2 kg, it was about 128 yuan, which was about 20 SGD. I think if you have high-tech farming, that price would not be, for the everyday person because of the investment in the tech. So we also see companies in Wanzhou making like pre-made Kaoyu meals. You can even order or buy Kaoyu in a vacuum pack and then have it at home. So that
Have you
also,
tried that?
I have, but I don't really like it. I think there's a
Recommend it?
artificial taste to it that, I think fish as, maybe it's my Cantonese mother telling me that like fish should be eaten fresh lah. So a pre-made fish meal would not.
You're so spoiled.
Yeah. So there is.
Yes.
So we have that commercial part of it. Then I think it's also changing like city landscapes. There's also push to serve Kaoyu in more sanitized and like atas places, because the dish is used to be served along roads and along the ports. So now they are housed in like this cultural and tourism district that actually I think, if I'm not wrong, the local authorities invested like $186 million to build. So it's a shopping street. It's behind like a famous ancient park, and then it is also like there are also like a lot of Kaoyu stalls there. So in the past, I mean, I think you'll be familiar with the Marina Bay steamboats. Before we have that, before we have the Marina Bay Sands now. So it used to be housed in places like
Yes.
this. Then now they are now in these pedestrian streets and this refurbished tourism street streets. So we see the dish changing what we see in the city and pushing for that urban growth as well. Then every October, there's also a Kaoyu festival in Wanzhou. So that draws the local visitors. So in that sense, yeah, it is big business and they are determined to keep it growing bigger.
And how does the government actually ensure that food or a dish is properly cultivated in order to tap food tourism, which I assume is also a growing thing in China, where as people become more affluent, they are traveling just to try out a certain dish, and they want to taste what they think is the authentic version of all of that.
So I think in Wanzhou there's also a school that teaches people how to make Kaoyu. So within that school there's a curriculum, but and there are steps. So the thing about Wanzhou being named by the hometown of Kaoyu by the China Cuisine Association, also the steps involved in making it. So from the grilling to cooking in oil to the smoking it, there is a proper procedure. And I think in that sense they try to formalize it to make sure that that process itself can be passed down and kept, so that people can taste the authentic curry.
Yeah, so that's very, very, very methodical then.
Yes.
Yeah. So coming back to the question of where did Kaoyu come from, as we know, coming from Asia, we have seen so many disputes about food and dishes and where they originate. So I think that you remember that our colleague in India, Debashi, had written about the court fight over the origins of butter chicken, right? Whether it was first concocted in Pakistan or in India. And then here at home in Singapore, we also have similar tussles with Malaysia over chicken rice and other dishes. Now, in China, given the geographic scale and the sheer vastness of the country and the richness of regional cuisines, I mean, we all know that there's no such thing as a Chinese cuisine. Are there other disagreements about where a certain dish came from besides Kaoyu?
So in Wanzhou and Wushan's case, I think because the term was just used very loosely, the term Kaoyu, because simply it means grilled fish, right? So I think when people in Wushan made it, they didn't think much of it when they used the term grilled. Just like how in parts of China, there's also a type of dish called zhen cai, which is simply steamed dish. I mean, just because the Chinese Cuisine Association named this as the base for Kaoyu, it's not going to stop people from grilling or stop people from steaming dishes. So in that sense, that is really quite just a formality given to it. But because Wanzhou has documented the steps of making it, the steps itself are what so-called made it Wanzhou Kaoyu. So I guess if Wushan really wanted to say, we have our zhibaoyu, but we also kao it in a certain way, it's just that the IP of the Kaoyu has been taken over by Wanzhou, so they can make their own. But again, it's that claim to who's the first, right? But to be honest, some might also say that, Wanzhou have gotten that status because it is a very big city in Chongqing compared to small Wushan, right? So it definitely has the resources to go and dig up the history to prove its case before the China Cuisine Association for it to be awarded that title. So there is politics here involved as well. But I don't think now, and I think, hopefully, I think the discussion has all moved beyond, while we want to try the authentic taste, but we also want to see who does it better. I think the same thing with Singapore and Malaysia when it comes to our food fights, right? I know I'm wading to very dangerous territory here, but then some people might say that it doesn't matter as long as we can recognize who does it better, right? So I think that fight has progressed beyond that. Just like another popular dish in China is the xiaolongxia, the mini lobsters. It's actually awarded to Hubei's Qianjiang County. It's a lesser known county in Hubei, but this dish is being sold all over China without really recognizing where it's from.
Right.
Right. So in that sense, Hubei being a small but Qianjiang being a small Hubei county, it's not going to go out and fight with Beijing to say you can't sell my xiaolongxia and not credit me, right? Because they would say that actually I'm just cooking xiaolongxia in a way that maybe is different from how you all do it. Even Dongbei people have their own version of mala. So who is to say that, So who does it better? I think is a more interesting question, lah.
And I know you have your views about which one is better, lah. I mean, based on your articles. And this is where I direct our listeners to read Cheng Wei's article on which is the better Kaoyu, the Wushan version or the one or the other one. So you are making me incredibly hungry, but before we finish our podcast and we get to eating our lunch, I do want to ask you about really what you have taken away from your time in China when it comes to attitudes towards food. So one of the most informative books I've read about Chinese food is this book by Fuchsia Dunlop. It's called Invitation to a Banquet. And towards the end of the book, she has this horizon scanning of, the variety of cuisines and cookery methods across China. She then sort of distills it down to what food in China can mean for the Chinese. And she talks about how it represents an act of love, it represents a symbol of power, and it also gives people a sense of belonging, when you eat something that is from your childhood. So now, you having been in China for 6 years now, and you've lived in both Beijing and Chongqing, give us a sense of what insights that has given you about what food can mean for both the Chinese and for yourself.
I think given that China was poor for a very long time before it became the world's second largest economy, right? Food and having enough of it is something that many Chinese, especially older generation, care a lot about. They even have a saying, right? 民以食
So
为
it's very
天.
emotional, right?
It is. To the people, food is
Yes.
heaven, right? 民以食为天. So this is played out, in the past. A lot of provinces have representation offices in Beijing called 驻京办, for their local officials to work out of, because it wasn't so convenient for them to travel to the capital often, right? So to stay in the capital, and they will miss home. One highlight is that the food served in the canteens will always be made with ingredients shipped from their own hometowns, for them to have that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in the
Okay.
past, can you imagine transport was so inaccessible, but like they will ship all this food to make sure that the local officials can taste home. So that's how important food is to them. Over time, as transport became easier, the working part became less important, and now these places became hotels and restaurants. And even for people in Beijing, they are the go-to place if you want to try like so-called authentic cuisine. So in that sense, Beijing, you are able to eat food across the country within the capital. For me, I think food is one of the most like straightforward ways for me to show that I accept and support someone's like culture, be it whatever region they are from. And I think being as a reporter, I think it's one of the easiest way to show to build rapport with your interviewees, right? By eating the food where they come from. Some of the places I go to also would be quite out of the way. I remember when I was in Guizhou, where the locals would invite me for their hot pot, and the hot pot would be made from like undigested forage from a cow's stomach. So like it's very
Wow.
grassy, right? So like yeah. So basically it's like
Yes.
unprocessed food. But it's also a dish that the locals are very proud of, because they think that this is the best that they have to offer. Because in Dong and Miao ethnic tribes in China, animals like cow, they know where to get the best grass, the kind that heals them and all that. So the fact that it's like kind of like pigs sniffing out truffles lah. They know where to get the best stuff. So by eating what they eat and making it into a pot, you will be eating a lot of the medicinal properties and all that. So for them, eating that would also be a sign of respect for their culture, for their beliefs, for their way of life. So and I think this has been a very fun way, I guess, having meals with my interviewees from across China, to understand more about their culture, more about childhood, right? Even for the Kaoyu, my interviewee who's the chairperson of the local curry association, she described how like when she was growing up, it was just salted fish grilled. But now as time moved past, and then they developed better ways as China became more affluent, it's a story of China's progress as well. The dish has also evolved, and talking to them about their childhood, their food, these are very sensory experiences that bring out a lot of memories. In that sense, it helps build that rapport. So I would say that food has been a very pertinent part of my time in China, and in the process of making friends, doing my stories. Yeah.
I mean, that really speaks to me, because I think that when you said that, when you eat the food and you are interested in it, it really indicates the respect that you have for them and for their culture and where they come from. And that is so very important. And food is never just food. We all know that. It's always a prism through which we understand culture, we understand history, we understand each other.
Yes.
So thank you very much for eating your way through China and explaining to us and our listeners what food really in China is about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shuing.
Well, that's a wrap for Asian Insider. If you'd like to read our column, we have a link in our podcast show notes. You can also sign up for our Asian Insider newsletter. This episode was produced and edited by Faisal Sani. Thanks for joining us.